Wrestling Roundup on FreeFM, ArrowFM, and NPR. As always, I'm Grady, and live on Skype we got Josh.
Hey.
It seems as though, we got so much tag team stuff happening at the moment, which is, not necessarily been a big feature across WWE recently. So do want to give it a little bit of time at the top of the show here to focus on it and to give it a bit of attention. And we're going to start off with the NXT side of things. Just because I'm sure you want to talk about at least one of these aspects here. New NXT Tag Team Champions, Pretty Deadly, looking pretty good in their showing against Dexter Lumis and Duke Hudson, but their challenges or their, grizzled opponents coming out and taking a bit of an annoyance that they weren't included in the gauntlet match, and Grizzled Young Veterans look to be trying to get a shot at those titles.
Which is fair, because they should have been in the gauntlet. I kind of felt once they decided on that, the Grizzled Young Veterans were the best choice. But they decided to go with this angle, which is fine. But I just would like to see the Grizzled Young Veterans getting something. Because they haven't had much since they came over from the UK. I mean, they've had title shot after title shot after title shot, but they've not had a win.
Yeah. It's like they've had plenty of chances. They just haven't been able to capitalize those chances and turn them into gold around the waist. It's hard to tell where exactly all of the teams sort of are. Because, Pretty Deadly were just defending the titles against Dexter Lumis and Duke Hudson, who are, a mixed oddball team, and now, their two biggest challenges coming after them are, who I believe were last seen as heels in the Grizzled Young Veterans and the heels in the Legado del Fantasma, so I just don't know where everybody sits on this, and at least there are teams down here. We were able to hold a gauntlet match, and we've got the Grizzled Young Vets, and there's just so many options and so many things that the NXT Tag Team division can do, and maybe it's not always the ones that we expect, but they're doing something.
Yeah, it was definitely a case where they had the pivot irrational, had the pivot suddenly, and they have the division to be able to sustain it and be able to do that. Definitely not the case on the main roster.
No, the main roster seems to be suffering from the opposite problem,
Yeah. Imagine if suddenly, out of nowhere, Riddle got suspended and had to have his title relinquish his title. Who would they put on as the Raw? Who could they possibly make the Raw champions? But the only option would pretty much be, I want to smoke, but I don't know their name. Yeah, Street Profits. I couldn't think of the name for some reason.
We all blank from time to time, but yeah, it's a weird one because NXT, it's so full of teams, there's so much we can do with it, and then main roster, we've got two whole rosters of individuals, and we're unifying the titles because we don't have any tag teams.
Yeah, the Usos is like even worse of a situation. It's like they have a backup option on Raw. There's nobody on SmackDown. So yeah, it's just a case of they really do need to unify those titles just to make it so that there's more of an option around. Because then you would have if say the Usos win that match, you would then have options for them facing the Street Profits. As well as, I know they kind of got a shot, but really didn't, with the Viking Raiders.
Yeah.
And then you could throw random two people together for just to face the Usos. And it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but they definitely they need to shrink those tag titles down to one set.
Yeah, it's not the worst tag team division in the WWE. We'll get to that one later on, but it is definitely not that deep. And every week we'd sit here and we'd talk about like, oh, the Usos are going up against Team X. They have to lose here because who else could they face? And then they'd win. And we'd say the same thing about whoever's got the Raw tag team titles at the time as well. We're like, oh, who's going to take it off them? And then they win. And you're like, all right. And your options just dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. And yeah, this is really the only possible path you could take, minus a couple of rematches and some titles being taken off them. But it should be an absolute banger of a match between the two teams. It's a combination we haven't seen before as well.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of did prior to WrestleMania when we had like a three-way team thing that also involved, I think, the Street Profits. But yeah, this is like a straight-up two-team match that's just going to be a banger, and I think we should enjoy it.
Because if we're talking about tag team divisions in the WWE, we do have to talk about the women's tag team division, which is, I believe, and this is slightly ignoring the NXT women's tag team division, just in general, the shallowest division that exists in the WWE.
Yeah, it's definitely not only just maybe shallowest division, the least cared about.
True.
By not just the fans. Yeah, I mean, we harp on it week after week after week. There's a certain set of titles in NXT that didn't need to exist.
100%.
That could solve a lot of problems.
Especially now with a lot of the crossover with NXT and sending talent to there and all of this. It never should have been two separate divisions. It would have been perfect to just have the one. If you're looking at the main roster, right, you had like 3 tag teams and one of them just exploded with Ripley turning on Morgan here. These titles in general, I feel like were created just to get another woman's title on the card that they could give to people who weren't in like the number 1 spot, for example, like here. You know, we want a title on Sasha Banks, but we can't give her the Raw Women's title because that's on Bianca Belair. And you sort of got yourself into a position where instead of introducing a secondary women's title, we introduced tag team titles. The problem with that is that you need a whole brand new division to run that.
Yeah. That was what the whole movement behind these titles failed to really see when they were calling for them. Because let's face it, the fans did call for these titles to exist. They didn't foresee that the issues with booking the women. Because then you would have to force random tag teams that would never had anything to do with each other into tag teams just to fulfill match quotas. And then as soon as they're done with that match, that tag team breaks up again. They don't continue. And that's just been over and over and over again. I really think they should, if they were going to bring the NXT titles in, they should have retired these. Or let them win it and never bring them back to the main roster.
Yeah, I don't know. We can't sit here and keep repeating the same thing over and over, right? But like, there was never any reason to split those titles, and we're really seeing the downside of it now. Because with Sasha Banks and Naomi defeating Ripley and Morgan here, they're going to sit around with the belts around their waist and ultimately do nothing. I can't think of like a really awesome moment off the top of my head with either of the women's tag team belts. They have just been a prop.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is double champions with Sasha and Bayley.
True.
When both of them carried the other championships.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. in fact, the entire second tag team run of Bayley and Sasha was pretty good. Right up to when they exploded. But yeah, I mean, other than that, it's just been one boring tag team reign after another. Even your girls, the Iconics, didn't get a good reign.
No, and these belts were arguably like made for them. It would have been perfect. It was, two women who were already a tag team. Prior to these titles, everything was set up in there. Nothing. We just can't get anything out of these titles. To me, they are just a prop that is unneeded on both sides. No matter how much deeper the NXT Women's Tag Team division is or isn't, it's still unneeded. I do believe that a secondary female title would have gone a lot better, because you don't need a whole nother division. It's like the same people who are sitting around clamoring for a trios title or a six-man title. It's a whole nother division that we have to dedicate airtime to. It's a whole nother division that we have to assign people into. And
by doing that, you also peg them into those roles, and thus you can't use them for main event storylines, because you already have them occupied somewhere else.
It's a real tough balance, and I don't know. I don't believe that those titles are needed anymore. I don't believe that the two different tag team titles are needed anymore. If this is the era of championship unification and cleanup, then please bring together the WWE and NXT Women's Tag Team Championships.
And then leave them on NXT.
They can come and visit the main roster from time to time, but they don't need to be there the whole time. One last match to talk about before we head into our entrance theme this week. There was a United States Championship match on Raw. Finn Balor defended his title.
Yeah, it was a really good match. I know a lot of people are really hating on the fact that Finn had a 45-day reign and didn't do much with it. I would say what he did was he elevated Austin Theory. Theory, by beating Finn Balor, he beat a former world champion, and a name that everybody knows. So, I would say he's just a much bigger off and better off person than he was would have been, say, a faction Damian Priest.
True.
So I just like to say we're seeing glimpses of that potential of that diamond being shined in Austin Theory now.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you say, right? Because if Austin Theory defeated Damian Priest, would go like, oh, okay. But when Austin Theory, or just Theory, defeats Finn Balor, it's a talking point. There's a reason people are complaining about it. There's a reason people are talking about it. And that is because it means something. Theory looked amazing, and Theory did his bit, and Finn Balor unfortunately can't always hold a championship around his waist.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with being a talent that gets other people over.
There's a lot of them.
There has been a lot of people that have had that type of role. There's been a lot of people that's been very successful and still got people over. I want to say Sheamus is a great example. He's a multi-time world champion, but he's also somebody that you can count on to get somebody over if you need to.
Mm-hmm. And he's just plain awesome. But that is the intro into our theme that we are going to play this week, because it is going to be Theory's theme, and that is hopefully playing for you right about now. And you're back with Wrestling Roundup on FreeFM, ArrowFM, and MPR. I'm Grady, he's Josh. We still got quite a chunk to talk about, but let's start off with a segment of the week. Ezekiel, Kevin Owens, Chad Gable, lie detector test.
Oh. Yeah, what can you say? This was just pure gold from start to finish. I just love that this whole thing with Ezekiel is just driving Kevin Owens mad. It's just so funny to me. Obviously, we all realize it really is Elias, but I love how far they're going with this. That said, it was just hilarious watching Gable try to do it. And also we have a new catchphrase. Who wants to see Zeke speak?
That sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, yes it does.
Yeah, it was just a good, fun comedy entertainment segment, and it didn't detract from the wrestling. It didn't do anything else. It's there to build up Kevin Owens versus Ezekiel. If this is Ezekiel's new character, I'm truly interested in seeing how far they take it, as you say. You know, is this Ezekiel to the moon? Is this going to be dropped and switched back? I don't know. Personally, I hope we just go deeper and deeper and deeper with it. Chad Gable's gold in whatever you put him in, so awesome inclusion in this segment.
Yeah, what can you really say? It's just a case of these are two of the best on the mic on the current roster. Kevin Owens is godly. I mean, he got to stand his own against Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's enough said. And then Elias has just always been able to connect with the crowd. So, and I think he's really getting into this Ezekiel thing. I don't know how far they can go with it, but it's definitely a lot of fun while it lasts. And it's definitely, I think, a way to, at the end of the day, a face run for Elias.
Yeah. A face run for Ezekiel, please.
Yeah. I mean, once they change it back. Because he is getting over and more with the crowd in a way that's not heelish. And I think this may be a proving ground to see if maybe he can go the next step. So I want to see where they go with this storyline, because I'm very interested, because where were you going to go after Steve Austin with Kevin Owens if you couldn't go straight to Roman Reigns?
Yeah. There wasn't a whole lot necessarily for him, right? Like, he didn't have a huge amount of build-up coming into it, and he had to carry that side of everything, and Kevin Owens has done amazing for himself in the last 3 months. And this is just continuing his momentum.
Yeah. And just imagine that 6 months ago, there were people that were like, he's going to leave WWE. 3 months later, he's announced he signed a new contract, and then he wrestles for Steve Austin at WrestleMania. And now he's having some of the most entertaining segments on Raw with Ezekiel.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't think Kevin Owens versus Stone Cold Steve Austin was on my bingo card. But we got it, and it wasn't horrendous, and it was fine. Jumping over to SmackDown, I got a couple of topics from here that I'd love to put out there. You know, we had an Intercontinental Championship match as well. Jinder Mahal, remembering that he's hired by the WWE, decides to come out and lose to Ricochet.
Yeah, it was an alright match. It wasn't anything really to write home about, but it's definitely another match that helped at least remind people that Ricochet has the title.
That is something I need to be reminded of constantly. We made that switch, we gave it to him, and yep, we did that thing.
Yeah, so we'll have to see where he goes, but at least it's not a bad spot to be in at the moment. I mean, if you take Roman Reigns out of this equation, he's the top champion of SmackDown.
Yeah. I guess you're right. To be fair, if you take Roman Reigns out of the equation, Theory's the top champion of Raw, so...
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. Well, Roman's just in a league of his own anyway, so it's not that it's him and then a Grand Canyon-sized crater and everybody else.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And one of his biggest challenges, Drew McIntyre, is currently spending his time just chasing after Sami Zayn.
Yeah, we're not ready for that match yet. I feel like I think that pay-per-view in Scotland, in Wales, I think that's a good time to have the Scottish Warrior versus Roman Reigns.
Okay.
So I think we'll hold off for a while on that. Drew can, I guess, I don't want to say spin his wheels, but have these little feuds like with Zayn. Zayn has been entertaining. But, so yeah, I want to see more and more of this. But yeah, it's definitely, I think we're building McIntyre back up towards Roman in an eventual clash. And I think the perfect time will be that live event that was announced that's taking place in the UK in September.
Big stadium event. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we get there, because obviously Roman Reigns, his tag team is a little bit busy at the moment doing the main part of it. We think Nakamura has been floating around as a challenger. It does almost feel like we've just gone into a holding pattern with Reigns at the moment. Like, we're not expecting him to drop the title anytime soon. There's no huge threats on the horizon. You know, we've immediately gone to Nakamura, who's not a huge threat, and Drew McIntyre's all wrapped up and busy. And yeah, Reigns sort of just gets to sit pretty on his throne at the top of both shows.
Yeah, he definitely gets to. And I'm fine with that because he's done so much heavy lifting up to this point. For a while, we were just talking about the bloodline being so good and everything else being okay to mid. And so I'm fine with him slowing it down a little bit, having a match here and there, and just getting to enjoy being the double champion for a little bit, and then we get to build to a bigger match.
Because I'm taking a good scroll down the Superstars page, trying to see, who could come after Roman Reigns, and it would make a little bit of sense. Obviously, AJ Styles and Edge both still currently fighting each other. Too busy to come after him himself. Bobby Lashley also a little bit too busy to come on down. Brock Lesnar's disappeared off the face of the earth. Cody Rhodes needs to finish up with Seth Rollins first. But there are some names there. Obviously, Seth Rollins always built-in feud ready to go. Drew McIntyre, we've already talked about a little bit. Gunther just recently coming onto SmackDown. Could also be a possibility. I just don't know if they want to put him under Roman Reigns so quickly.
Yeah, that's definitely something I would try not to do.
Kevin Owens could always do it.
There's a pay-per-view in end of May, beginning of June, that can also potentially give us another option at some point down the road. Of course, I'm talking about the Money in the Bank.
Yeah, you've been spitting out your predictions for Money in the Bank for like the last 6 months.
Yeah. So yeah, I have to actually take a step back, because I've been so heavy on Riddle. I could see them giving it to Cody.
Okay.
Too. I like the idea of Riddle having it though, because I just want to see what he does with it. But they could give it to Cody to give him a future title match at some point, so he can try to accomplish his dream. I think it would be wise not to have him cash in the typical style, but like announcing it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Maybe if they have a premium live event on at a Madison Square Garden, he could do kind of cash in, like, I want a title match at that event.
Gotcha. Yeah. we're coming quickly out of time here, but the only thing I'm going to throw in if we're talking about Money in the Bank is that, for me, it would be quite funny to see Roman Reigns still standing at the top with a certain architect running around with a Money in the Bank briefcase being a constant threat. That's all I'm going to say.
Possible. It's definitely possible, but Seth really doesn't need it.
No, he does not. I just think it would be a funny imagery to have him running around with the briefcase again and constantly threatening Reigns that, now might be the time. Alrighty, well, that is all we've got time for this week on the show. It's been great talking to you.
Bye.
You can visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/WrestlingRNDup, or our Twitter page, twitter.com/WrestlingRNDup, or our YouTube page, which has all 474 episodes from the last 9 years of this show at youtube.com/WrestlingRNDup. And we will catch you next week.